The taxi driver stopped a block early and said, "This is where you get out. Don't make me say it twice." His eyes were locked on the rearview mirror, knuckles white on the steering wheel. 3 black SUVs have been following us for 6 blocks. You got maybe 30 seconds before they box us in. I glanced back and saw them. Professional formation, tinted windows, moving with coordinated precision that made my prosecutor instincts scream danger. "Miguel El Carnicero Ruiz, the butcher, is in that lead vehicle," the driver said, his accent thick with street authenticity. "You prosecuted his nephew last year, sent him to death row for triple homicide." He turned around, and I saw faded gang tattoos on his neck that his collar had been hiding. Los Hermanos Inc., the kind that marked someone for life in the criminal underworld. Name's Rico Morales. Used to run with Los Hermanos before I got smart. The SUVs were closing in, maybe 50 yards behind us. Through the windshield of the lead vehicle, I could make out a figure gesturing to the other drivers, coordinating their attack pattern with military precision. "The Rodriguez case," I said, ice water flooding my veins as the memory crashed back. 15-year-old kid, 3 people gunned down in broad daylight outside a community center, mountain of evidence that had seemed unshakable. The death sentence I'd fought for, the appeals I'd defended, the threats that had followed me for months afterward. Rico pulled into Grand Central Market's loading chaos, vendors and shoppers creating the kind of crowd that professional killers avoided. 8 years ago, my little brother Emilio was going to testify against Los Hermanos in a murder case. You were his prosecutor. His voice turned cold, bitter with years of suppressed rage. You chose not to put him in protective custody. Too expensive. Too much paperwork for one scared kid. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Emilio Morales, 19 years old, scared but determined to do the right thing. I'd made a calculated decision based on budget constraints and department guidelines that prioritized high-profile cases over individual witness safety. 3 days before the trial, Emilio was found shot execution-style in an alley 6 blocks from the courthouse. "My daughter Isabella is 7 years old now," Rico continued, already reaching across to open my door. "She taught me something about forgiveness that I never learned on the streets. People can do bad things and still choose to do good things later." Men in expensive suits were exiting the SUVs 2 blocks away, moving toward us with the fluid coordination of Special Forces operators. 200 people in that market, 15 different exits. Los Hermanos won't start shooting in a crowd. Brings too much police attention and federal heat. Rico's voice was urgent, desperate. "Run straight through to Carlos's fish stand in the back corner. Tell him Rico sent you. He'll get you to the service tunnel that leads to 7th Street. I bolted from the taxi into the market's sensory overload. Vendors hawking fresh produce in Spanish and English, families shopping for dinner ingredients, mariachi music mixing with the calls of merchants advertising their wares. The smell of grilled meat and fresh tortillas filled the air. Normal life continuing while professional killers hunted me through the crowd. Behind me, car doors slammed with professional coordination. I could hear voices speaking in rapid Spanish, coordinating search patterns, describing my appearance to market vendors who might provide information for the right price. The hunt had officially begun, and I was the prey. Carlos's fish stand was buried deep in the market's maze, past produce vendors who eyed me with curiosity as I pushed through crowds of evening shoppers. Children ran between stalls while their parents haggled over prices, completely unaware that armed men were methodically searching for targets in their neighborhood market. A heavy-set man with weathered hands was cleaning salmon when I reached his stall, sweat pouring down my face despite the cool evening air. Ice displays held fresh catches that gleamed under fluorescent lights, and the smell of ocean mixed with the metallic scent of my own fear. "Carlos? Rico sent me. I need to get out of here fast." The words tumbled out as I glanced back toward the main entrance. 3 men in suits were moving through the crowd methodically, showing photographs to vendors, offering cash for information about my location. Carlos looked up from his work, studied my face for a moment, then jerked his head toward a door hidden behind hanging plastic sheets. "Rico's friend is family. Through there, down the concrete steps, follow the service tunnel until you see daylight. Don't stop. Don't look back. Don't trust anyone who tries to help you." The tunnel was narrow and poorly lit, filled with decades of accumulated grime and the constant drip of condensation from overhead pipes. My dress shoes weren't designed for running on wet concrete, but I moved as fast as possible while voices echoed behind me in the main market area. The concrete walls were covered with gang graffiti spanning multiple generations, territorial markers that told the story of neighborhood wars fought with bullets and knives. Some of the tags were fresh, others had been painted over so many times they looked like archaeological layers of urban violence. I emerged on 7th Street 3 blocks away, gasping and disoriented in the early evening chaos of downtown foot traffic. Office workers heading home, street vendors packing up their stalls, homeless camps establishing themselves in doorways for the night. The normal rhythm of urban life that felt surreal after my underground escape. But when I glanced back, one of the black SUVs was already turning the corner, moving with the slow deliberation of predators who'd lost the scent but knew their prey was nearby. They'd found me too quickly, which meant professional tracking, probably GPS monitoring my phone or credit cards, maybe both. I ducked into the first business I saw, a small law office that stayed open late for clients who couldn't make daytime appointments. The waiting room was cramped but clean, filled with Spanish-language legal pamphlets and immigration forms that suggested they served the neighborhood's undocumented population. "I need to use your phone," I said to the receptionist, pulling out my prosecutor's badge with shaking hands. "It's a federal emergency. People are trying to kill me." The young woman behind the desk, maybe 25 with kind eyes and professional demeanor, stared at my identification, then at my obviously distressed appearance. "You're DA Michael Castillo," she said, recognition dawning in her voice. "I saw you on Channel 7 last month talking about the Rodriguez conviction, how it proved the justice system works." She glanced toward the front windows where two men in suits had positioned themselves across the street. "There are people outside asking about you. They showed up right after you came in." My blood turned to ice. They weren't just tracking me. They were anticipating my movements, covering escape routes, questioning potential helpers, operating with resources and coordination that suggested serious money and months of planning behind the assassination attempt. Maria Gonzalez, according to her nameplate, gestured toward a back hallway lined with family photos and children's drawings. "Employee parking behind the building, but maybe you should call the police instead of running around downtown like this." Her concern was maternal, genuine, the instinct of someone watching a person make dangerous decisions. "Los Hermanos has informants inside the police department," I explained, moving toward the rear exit while trying to control my panic. "Calling local law enforcement might just tell them exactly where I am." I paused at the door. "After I leave, lock everything. Don't let anyone in. Don't answer questions. These people kill witnesses without hesitation." The employee parking lot was cramped and poorly lit, surrounded by chain-link fence that backed against an alley where homeless camps had been established in the shadows between broken streetlights. Shopping carts filled with possessions, tarps stretched between abandoned cars, the infrastructure of people who'd been forgotten by the system I represented. My car was still parked at the courthouse downtown, assuming it hadn't been rigged with explosives or was being monitored by more of their surveillance team. I needed transportation, but every taxi, every rideshare, every public transit option could be compromised by people with enough money and connections. I needed federal help, someone with jurisdiction and resources that Los Hermanos couldn't buy or intimidate. Agent Diana Reeves from the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force had worked the Rodriguez case with me, and she'd been vocal about witness protection failures that had gotten people killed unnecessarily. The payphone I found 4 blocks away was a relic from before cell technology, the kind most people ignored, but that couldn't be traced or monitored remotely. My hands shook as I dialed Diana's direct number, hoping she was still working the late shift that federal agents pulled when chasing organized crime. Diana answered on the second ring, her voice sharp with late-night federal agent efficiency. "Reeves, Agent Reeves, this is Michael Castillo. Los Hermanos is hunting me tonight. Professional operation, multiple vehicles, coordination that suggests months of planning. I need federal protection immediately." My voice was steady, despite the panic clawing at my chest. "Where are you right now?" Her tone shifted to crisis management mode, the kind of focus that came from years of handling federal emergencies. "Are you somewhere defensible?" "Payphone on Spring Street, but they've found me at 3 different locations within minutes of arrival. They're tracking me somehow, maybe phone GPS or credit card usage, possibly both." A black SUV turned onto the street, moving with the slow deliberation of predators searching for scent. "Get to the federal building parking garage," Diana commanded with military precision. "I'll have a tactical team meet you at the entrance in 15 minutes. But Michael, there's something about the Rodriguez case you need to know immediately. We've discovered evidence suggesting the original conviction was based on completely fabricated testimony." My world tilted sideways as the implications crashed over me like a physical blow. "What kind of evidence?" "The gang member who testified against Rodriguez has recanted his entire statement. Says he was coerced by detectives who needed to close a politically sensitive case before the election. Internal Affairs is conducting a full investigation, but preliminary findings suggest Rodriguez was completely innocent of all charges." The SUV was getting closer, its occupants scanning storefronts and pedestrians with professional attention to detail. I started walking quickly toward the federal building, still 6 blocks away through downtown streets that would provide cover and civilian witnesses who might deter public assassination. "If Rodriguez was innocent," I said, pieces falling into a horrifying pattern that recontextualized everything I thought I knew about the case, "then Miguel Ruiz isn't trying to kill me for revenge. He's trying to eliminate me to prevent the truth about the real murders from coming out." The logic was inescapable and terrifying. Someone had framed an innocent 15-year-old kid to protect the actual killer, who was now orchestrating professional assassination attempts to prevent the truth from emerging. "That's exactly what we think," Diana confirmed grimly. "Rodriguez was convenient, a young gang member with priors who couldn't afford experienced representation, but the real killer is still free, still connected to Los Hermanos, still protected by the false conviction that put an innocent boy on death row." I reached the federal building as Diana emerged with 2 agents I didn't recognize, all of them carrying visible weapons and wearing tactical gear that suggested serious federal response capability. The building itself was fortress-like, designed to withstand terrorist attacks and other threats to federal operations. But as we approached the entrance, Muzzle flashes erupted from rooftops across the street. Sniper fire, coordinated and precise, aimed at federal agents rather than me specifically. The first shots shattered windows in the federal building lobby, sending security guards diving for cover. Diana pushed me behind concrete barriers, while bullets sparked off building facades and shattered windows in nearby businesses. "Get down and stay down!" she shouted into her radio, coordinating response with backup units throughout the city. This wasn't random gang violence anymore. This was warfare against federal law enforcement. The scope and coordination suggested resources far beyond typical street gang capabilities, possibly military training and equipment that indicated serious federal connections. "They're not just trying to kill you," Diana shouted over the gunfire while coordinating radio responses with tactical teams. "They're attacking the entire investigation team, everyone who could expose the truth about Rodriguez and the other false convictions we've discovered." The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Professional withdrawal coordinated with the same military precision as the initial attack. But the message was unmistakable. Los Hermanos had evolved beyond street gang capabilities into something with federal resources and high-level connections. Sirens wailed in the distance as backup units responded to reports of automatic weapons fire in the federal district. Emergency vehicles, SWAT teams, federal marshals, the kind of response that would normally deter criminal organizations from continuing their operations. "We need to get you to a secure facility immediately," Diana said, as armored vehicles surrounded the federal building. "Somewhere they can't anticipate, can't infiltrate, can't attack, without triggering massive law enforcement response and federal investigation." The safe house was a fortified compound in the industrial district, surrounded by motion sensors, security cameras, and federal agents who'd been pulled from other assignments to protect witnesses in what was rapidly becoming the largest organized crime investigation in the city's history. Inside, the facility looked more like a military command center than a witness protection location. Multiple computer screens displayed surveillance feeds, communication intercepts, financial records, and organizational charts showing connections between Los Hermanos and various legitimate businesses and government agencies. "How many other cases?" I asked Diana, as we reviewed files showing systematic corruption, spanning multiple years and dozens of convictions. "How many innocent people are sitting in prison while the real killers operate freely under Los Hermanos protection?" "Preliminary count shows at least 23 cases over the past 7 years, she replied, spreading photographs and court documents across the conference table, all involving convenient witnesses who later recanted, all with evidence that now appears fabricated or manipulated to secure convictions. The patterns were undeniable once you knew what to look for. Young defendants with inadequate representation, key witnesses with connections to Los Hermanos, evidence that appeared and disappeared at convenient times, judges and prosecutors who seemed unusually motivated to secure specific convictions. My secure phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your daughter's school. Soccer practice was canceled today due to security concerns." The threat was direct, personal, escalating beyond my own safety to family members who had nothing to do with gang prosecution. Diana's technical team traced the message while I frantically called my ex-wife Catherine. No answer on her cell, no response at home, voicemail full with unplayed messages that suggested something was seriously wrong. Emma was supposed to be at Lincoln Elementary for after-school soccer, but when I called the main office, they said practice had been canceled due to security concerns. "They have Emma," I said, the words feeling like broken glass, scraping my throat raw. "This isn't about preventing testimony anymore, this is about leverage. They'll hurt my 9-year-old daughter unless I publicly recant everything and stop cooperating with federal investigations." The threat represented an escalation beyond professional assassination into family terrorism, the kind of pressure that had broken other prosecutors and witnesses who'd tried to expose organized crime operations. But it also represented desperation, the actions of criminals who knew their network was being dismantled. Diana's response team was already mobilizing, coordinating with local police, school security, and federal marshals to locate Emma before Los Hermanos could use her as a bargaining chip in negotiations that would determine whether an innocent man died and guilty killers walked free. "We've got units at the school, at Catherine's work, at Emma's usual hangout spots," Diana reported, as agents coordinated search operations. "But if they took her hours ago, she could be anywhere in the metropolitan area by now." My phone rang 15 minutes later. Miguel Ruiz himself, speaking in accented English that carried the absolute authority of someone accustomed to being feared and obeyed without question by everyone in his organization and beyond. "Prosecutor Castillo, you have interfered with business arrangements that have been profitable for many people over many years. The Rodriguez conviction serves justice, even if the methods were unconventional by your narrow legal standards." His tone was conversational, almost friendly, which made the underlying threat more terrifying. "Where is my daughter?" I demanded, though my voice cracked with barely controlled panic. "Emma is enjoying the hospitality of people who understand the value of family cooperation in resolving business disputes. 9 years old, blonde hair, wearing her soccer uniform with number 12 on the back, very athletic, reminds me of my own granddaughter who plays for her middle school team." The specific details proved they actually had her, had been watching her for weeks or months to learn her routines, her interests, her vulnerabilities. This wasn't a spontaneous kidnapping. It was a carefully planned operation designed to leverage my parental instincts. What do you want? Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., you will hold a press conference at City Hall. You will announce that federal investigations have confirmed the Rodriguez conviction was correct and based on solid evidence. You will publicly thank Los Hermanos leadership for their cooperation in fighting crime and protecting community safety. The demand was insane, requiring me to publicly lie about evidence that could free an innocent man while protecting murderers who were threatening my child. But Emma's life hung in the balance, and I was her father before I was a prosecutor. And if I refuse, then Emma will be returned to you in pieces, one finger at a time, while you listen to her screaming over the phone and begging her daddy to make the bad men stop hurting her. Miguel paused to let the horror sink in completely. You have 18 hours to choose between your daughter's life and your commitment to a justice system that values convenient lies over inconvenient truths. The line went dead, leaving me staring at Diana and her team as they coordinated rescue operations that felt impossibly complex and time-consuming when every minute brought my daughter closer to torture and death at the hands of professional killers. We'll find her, Diana promised, but her voice lacked the confidence I desperately needed to hear. Gang kidnappings always involve multiple people, multiple locations, multiple opportunities for mistakes that we can exploit. Someone will talk, someone will slip up. I spent the next 8 hours in federal protective custody, watching agents analyze phone records, coordinate with surveillance teams, and interview gang associates who might know where Emma was being held. But every lead went nowhere. Every potential informant refused to cooperate out of fear for their own families. The clock on the wall seemed to move faster as Miguel's deadline approached. 18 hours had become 12 hours, then 8, then 6, with no concrete leads about Emma's location. Diana's team was professional and dedicated, but Los Hermanos had been planning this operation for months. At midnight, 6 hours before Miguel's deadline, Catherine finally returned my call. She'd been working a double shift at the hospital, unaware that Emma had been taken from school by men wearing federal badges and carrying official identification that had convinced school administrators they were legitimate. How did they get federal credentials? I asked Diana, though I was starting to suspect the answer. They didn't need to fake them, she replied with grim certainty. We believe there's at least one federal agent working directly with Los Hermanos, providing inside information, official cover, and legitimate law enforcement resources for their operations. The scope of the corruption was staggering, reaching beyond local police and prosecutors into federal agencies that were supposed to be above gang influence and political pressure. Emma hadn't been kidnapped by criminals impersonating law enforcement. She'd been taken by actual law enforcement officers who were also criminals. My phone buzzed with a multimedia message at 1 a.m. Emma sitting in what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse, still wearing her soccer uniform, but with tears streaming down her face and duct tape covering her mouth. Her hands were zip-tied behind the chair, and there was a newspaper with today's date visible in the frame. She's alive, I told Diana, showing her the image while trying to control my own emotional breakdown. But they're not going to wait much longer. Miguel gave me 18 hours, and we're already past the halfway point with no leads. Diana's technical analysts studied the photograph with microscopic attention, looking for background details, lighting conditions, architectural features that might indicate location. But the image was professionally composed, showing proof of life without revealing useful investigative information. The warehouse appeared to be industrial, with high ceilings and concrete floors that suggested it was in the manufacturing district. But there were hundreds of similar buildings in the metropolitan area, most of them abandoned since the economic recession and perfect for illegal activities. At 2 a.m., Rico Morales appeared at the safe house. The taxi driver who'd saved my life 14 hours earlier, now wearing street clothes and carrying military equipment that suggested serious combat experience beyond his gang background. I know where they're holding your daughter, he announced without preamble. Los Hermanos uses the same warehouse for all their special projects, the same place where they tortured my brother before killing him 8 years ago. Diana looked skeptical, her federal agent training making her suspicious of coincidences and convenient information from unreliable sources. How can you be certain? Because I've been watching Miguel Ruiz for 8 years, learning his patterns, mapping his properties, waiting for the perfect moment to make him pay for what he did to Emilio. Rico opened his equipment bag, revealing weapons, body armor, and surveillance gear that looked military-grade. The warehouse is in the industrial district, surrounded by abandoned buildings that provide cover for illegal activities. Normally it's guarded by 8 to 10 men, but most of Los Hermanos is spread across the city tonight protecting other operations. Emma is being held by maybe 4 men, all focused on preventing police raids. This is a federal investigation, Diana protested, citing protocols that seemed inadequate for the current crisis. We can't authorize civilian involvement in armed rescue operations, especially involving gang members with criminal histories. Then don't authorize it, Rico replied coldly. Just don't interfere with it. Your federal response protocols will take hours to coordinate and approve through proper channels, and Miguel's deadline is in 4 hours. Emma doesn't have time for proper bureaucratic procedures. I looked at Diana, then at Rico, then at the photograph of my terrified daughter tied to a chair in some godforsaken warehouse. The federal agents were professionals, but they were constrained by rules and procedures that criminals ignored. What exactly are you proposing? I eliminate the guards, secure the building, extract Emma to safety. Then your federal agents arrive as backup, arrest anyone still breathing, and take official credit for the rescue operation. Rico's plan was brutally simple and completely illegal. I don't care about recognition or legal protection. I just want Miguel to suffer the way he made my family suffer. Diana's radio crackled with updates from surveillance teams who'd found nothing useful, SWAT coordinators who needed additional time for planning and legal clearance, federal prosecutors who were analyzing legal implications, while a child sat in a warehouse with killers. How do we know you're not working with them? Diana asked the obvious question. How do we know this isn't another trap designed to eliminate federal witnesses and complete their operation? Rico pulled out his phone and showed us a photograph. A little girl with pigtails and a bright smile, holding a crayon drawing that said, "I love you, Papa," in uneven letters surrounded by hearts and flowers. This is Isabella, my daughter. She's 8 years old now. The reason I left Los Hermanos. The reason I've stayed clean despite every temptation to return to the life that nearly destroyed me and my family. His voice was quiet, emotional, completely sincere. Emma reminds me of Isabella when she was younger. Innocent, trusting, believing that adults exist to protect children from monsters. Rico pulled out additional photographs showing Isabella at school events, birthday parties, family gatherings where she was surrounded by people who clearly loved her. I know what it's like to lose family to Los Hermanos violence. I won't let another child suffer because adults are too scared or too bureaucratic to act. I made the decision that would either save my daughter's life or get us both killed in the process. We do it, but I'm coming with you. Diana tried to object, citing federal protocols and legal liability that seemed irrelevant when my child's life was at stake. But I was already putting on tactical gear from Rico's supply bag, checking weapons that I'd trained with during prosecutor security courses. Emma is my responsibility. I failed to protect your brother 8 years ago, and that failure got him murdered by the same people who have my daughter now. I won't fail my own child. The warehouse district at 3 a.m. was a landscape of shadows and abandonment, empty buildings that had been gutted by economic recession and never rebuilt. Homeless camps occupied some structures, drug dealers used others, but most were simply abandoned to decay and criminal opportunity. Rico knew exactly how to approach without triggering security systems, which routes provided cover from surveillance cameras, which entrances were monitored by gang lookouts. His knowledge was detailed, specific, the result of years of planning for this exact moment. 4 guards visible from my reconnaissance, he whispered, as we crouched behind a shipping container 60 yards from the target building. 2 at the front entrance, 1 on the loading dock, 1 patrolling the perimeter. Miguel isn't here personally. He's at his estate planning your press conference and preparing for the political aftermath. Rico's plan was elegant in its simplicity. He would eliminate the exterior guards silently, while I created a diversion at the main entrance to draw attention away from his infiltration. Once the building was secure, we'd locate Emma and extract her before Los Hermanos reinforcements could respond to the attack. But as we moved into position, everything changed. The warehouse wasn't just guarded by gang members, it was surrounded by federal agents conducting their own rescue operation. Diana's team had analyzed the photograph, identified possible locations, and launched a coordinated assault without waiting for Rico and me. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions as FBI tactical teams encountered Los Hermanos security, who weren't expecting law enforcement to find them so quickly. The gang members had been prepared for a possible police raid, but not for a full federal assault with military-grade equipment and professional coordination. Rico pulled me behind cover as bullets sparked off concrete and metal surfaces around us, the sound echoing through the industrial district like a war zone. "Your federal friends just started a battle," he shouted over the chaos. "Emma's inside that building with armed men who know they're about to be arrested or killed. They've got nothing left to lose and every reason to eliminate witnesses." Through the smoke and muzzle flashes, I could see federal agents advancing on the warehouse while gang members returned fire from defensive positions behind industrial equipment and concrete barriers. Professional tactics on both sides, but Emma was trapped in the center of a battlefield. Rico pointed to a service entrance that wasn't covered by either the federal assault team or the gang defenders. "That door leads to the office section where they're holding Emma. I can get you there, but we'll be on our own once we're inside the building." I followed him across open ground swept by crossfire, my heart hammering as bullets whined overhead and explosions shook the warehouse structure. The service door was unlocked, opening into a maze of offices and storage rooms that smelled of dust, abandonment, and something worse that might have been old blood. The corridor was lined with empty offices that had once housed manufacturing administration, now filled with drug processing equipment and other evidence of criminal activity. Gang graffiti covered the walls, territorial markers mixed with threats against rival organizations and law enforcement. Emma's voice echoed from somewhere deeper in the building, crying for her daddy, begging someone not to hurt her anymore. The sound shattered something inside me, replacing fear with rage that made my hands steady and my purpose absolutely clear. We found her in a back office that had been converted into a holding area, tied to a metal chair with duct tape over her mouth. guarded by two men who were more focused on the gunfight outside than protecting their prisoner. Rico killed both of them with knife strikes to the throat, blood pooling on industrial carpet that had seen too much violence. "Daddy!" Emma's voice was muffled by tape, but her eyes showed relief mixed with terror as she realized I was actually there, not just another hallucination brought on by fear and exhaustion. She'd been crying for hours, her soccer uniform stained with dirt and worse, but she appeared physically unharmed. I cut her restraints with Rico's knife while he checked the corridor for additional threats, his professional paranoia keeping us alive in a building full of people who wanted to kill us. "Emma, baby, we're getting out of here right now. Don't look at the men on the floor. Just hold on to Daddy and keep your eyes closed." The gunfight outside was intensifying as federal agents breached the main warehouse area and Los Hermanos members made their final desperate stand against overwhelming law enforcement firepower. We needed to escape before the building became completely surrounded by federal agents who might not distinguish between kidnappers and rescuers. Rico led us through service corridors that avoided the main conflict, his knowledge of the building layout proving invaluable for navigation through a structure that was designed more like a fortress than a warehouse. But as we approached the exit we'd planned to use, Miguel Ruiz himself appeared with 4 heavily armed bodyguards. "Prosecutor Castillo," he said with terrifying calm, as if we were meeting at a social function rather than in the middle of a gun battle that would determine whether my daughter lived or died. "I offered you a simple choice between your daughter's life and Rodriguez's life. Instead, you chose to involve federal agents in what should have been a private family negotiation. The choice wasn't real," I replied, keeping Emma behind me while Rico positioned himself for combat against odds that would probably kill us all. "Rodriguez is innocent, and you know it. You killed those people yourself and let him take the blame to protect your own operations and maintain your network." Miguel smiled with genuine amusement, the expression of someone who'd manipulated the justice system for so long that he considered it a game rather than an institution. Rodriguez was guilty of being in the wrong place with inconvenient connections to people who could identify the real operations. Sometimes justice requires practical solutions to complex problems that idealistic prosecutors don't understand. He gestured to his bodyguards, who raised assault rifles that would turn the corridor into a killing ground. "Your daughter will now pay the price for your idealistic stubbornness and your refusal to accept reasonable business arrangements." Rico moved with professional lethality, 8 years of suppressed rage channeled into precise violence that had been planned and rehearsed countless times. 2 bodyguards were dead before they could fire their weapons, a third was down with a throat wound that would kill him in minutes, but the 4th managed to get off a burst that caught Rico in the shoulder and spun him around. Miguel drew his own weapon, a chrome-plated pistol that gleamed under the industrial lighting, and aimed it directly at Emma's head. "Drop your weapons, or the child dies right now, and you watch her brains splatter on the concrete before I kill you too." His voice was steady, matter of fact, the tone of someone who'd killed children before without losing sleep or feeling remorse. This wasn't an empty threat, it was a promise from someone who considered murder a business tool. That's when the wall exploded inward. Federal agents with breaching charges, tactical equipment, and overwhelming firepower that turned the corridor into a combat zone filled with smoke, debris, and automatic weapons fire that could kill everyone in the confined space. Miguel's remaining bodyguard was cut down in the initial assault, his body armor insufficient against federal ammunition designed to penetrate gang defenses. But Miguel himself grabbed Emma and pressed his pistol against her temple hard enough to leave marks. "Federal agents, back away or I execute the child right now," he shouted over the noise of continuing gunfire elsewhere in the building. "I want safe passage to the Mexican border and 24 hours before you start tracking me through international channels." Diana Reeves appeared through the breach, her weapon trained on Miguel, but unable to fire without risking Emma's life. "Release the child, and we can negotiate terms. Hurt her, and there's nowhere on earth you can hide from federal law enforcement resources. Your federal law enforcement has been hunting me for 15 years without success." Miguel laughed with genuine confidence. "I own judges, prosecutors, FBI agents, border guards, politicians at every level. The corruption goes higher and deeper than you can imagine or investigate." Rico, bleeding from his shoulder wound but still mobile and dangerous, caught my eye and gestured toward a fire axe mounted on the wall behind Miguel. If I could create a distraction, he might be able to reach it before Miguel could react to the movement. "You're right about the corruption," I said loudly, trying to keep Miguel's attention focused on me, while Rico positioned himself for a final attack. "But you made one critical mistake in your planning." "What mistake?" Miguel demanded, pressing the gun harder against Emma's temple until she whimpered with pain. "You killed Agent Sarah Chen last month because she was getting too close to the truth about your federal connections. But Chen had a partner who's been working undercover for 2 years, documenting every bribe, every threat, every murder your organization committed." It was a complete lie, but Miguel's eyes widened with sudden uncertainty as he tried to process whether this was truth or desperate manipulation. That moment of distraction was all Rico needed to execute the plan we'd never discussed, but both understood. Rico lunged for the fire axe while I threw myself at Miguel's gun arm, knocking his aim away from Emma's head toward the ceiling. The gun went off twice, bullets ricocheting off concrete walls and creating sparks that lit up the smoky corridor. Emma screamed and rolled away from the struggle, her soccer uniform torn, but her body intact. Rico buried the axe in Miguel's chest, with enough force to crack ribs and puncture organs that would kill him slowly and painfully. "This is for Emilio," Rico said quietly, watching Miguel die on the warehouse floor in a pool of blood that mixed with debris from the federal assault. "And for Emma, and for every other innocent person your family destroyed over the years." Miguel tried to speak, blood frothing from his mouth as his lungs filled with fluid, but only managed a wet gurgling sound before his eyes went blank and his body went limp. The man who'd terrorized a city for decades died like any other criminal, alone and surrounded by the wreckage of his empire. Federal agents secured the scene while paramedics treated Rico's gunshot wound and examined Emma for injuries beyond the obvious trauma of being kidnapped and threatened by killers. She was physically unharmed but emotionally devastated, clinging to me with desperate strength while federal crime scene technicians documented evidence. "It's over," Diana told me as we walked toward the ambulances that would transport us to medical facilities and debriefing centers. "Miguel's network is finished. We've got financial records, communication intercepts, testimony from surviving gang members who want to cooperate rather than face federal conspiracy charges." The aftermath took 18 months to fully resolve as federal prosecutors built cases against dozens of defendants, from street-level gang members to federal judges who'd been taking bribes for years. Rico received a suspended sentence in exchange for his cooperation with prosecutors and his role in rescuing Emma from certain death. The undercover federal agent I'd invented turned out to be real. Agent Jennifer Walsh had been gathering evidence for 3 years before Miguel discovered her investigation and ordered her assassination. Her death had accelerated the federal timeline, forcing them to act before their cases were completely prepared. Rodriguez was exonerated and released after serving 2 years on death row for crimes he didn't commit. The compensation he received from the state was substantial, but couldn't restore his faith in a justice system that had been willing to execute him for political convenience and prosecutorial ambition. Emma recovered physically from her kidnapping, but required extensive therapy to process the trauma of being held by people who'd threatened to torture and kill her, while her father listened helplessly. She learned to sleep through the night again, but she still checks door locks and asks where I'm going whenever I leave the house. I resigned as district attorney and now work for the Innocence Project, investigating wrongful convictions and fighting for people trapped by corrupt systems that value expedience over truth. The work pays significantly less, but feels more honest, focused on actual justice rather than conviction statistics and political advancement. Rico returned to driving taxi, but also volunteers for victim advocacy groups, using his street knowledge to help federal agents understand gang operations from an insider perspective. His daughter, Isabella, is 15 now and wants to study criminal justice in college, inspired by her father's transformation from criminal to hero. 5 years later, Los Hermanos has been completely dismantled as a criminal organization. 43 members were convicted on federal charges, including 12 law enforcement officers who'd been providing protection and inside information. The network of corruption stretched from street-level cops to federal prosecutors, but it ultimately collapsed when ordinary people chose courage over compliance. Sometimes I think about that taxi ride, about Rico's decision to save the prosecutor who'd failed his brother years earlier. How my life and Emma's life would have ended if he'd chosen revenge over redemption, if he'd let Miguel's assassins complete their mission that night. But mercy created the possibility for justice, even when that justice came with terrible personal costs for everyone involved. Emma and I still vary our routes home, still remain alert for signs of surveillance, still remember that predators wear respectable faces and operate through legitimate institutions as often as they work from criminal organizations. We also remember that salvation sometimes comes from unexpected sources, that former enemies can become allies, and that individual choices to act with courage rather than fear can expose and destroy even the most powerful criminal networks when people find the strength to do what's right, regardless of personal cost.